In the year 2020, I started a podcast about movies. Some episodes occasionally focused on other media as well. As I dealt with threatening interdimensional beings, I eventually met my other self from another universe where all the stuff I talked about got delayed. As it turns out, the stories as me and my guests described them were presented very differently in that other universe. So I continued podcasting these recaps, which apparently sound like improvised reviews, to entertain listeners of that other universe while they waited for the new release dates. Some episodes even focused on content of years past that did not come out in that other universe for whatever reason. The year is 2022. The podcast is now bi-weekly, unless stated otherwise. My name is Steven Shinder, and you're listening to Delayed Replay. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we talk about movies. Sometimes we talk about movies that got delayed in that other universe but came out on time here. But other times we talk about weird movies that came out here but apparently not in that other universe. So, for example, there were those Space Jam spin-offs and sequels and also like these Men in Black movies. There was one that came out earlier this year, which was one that predated the 1997 film. But yeah, slowly but surely we're getting through these in between things. So this time it's the Frank the Pug spin-off movie that came out in 2004. But introductions are in order. Joining me once again, you may have heard him on the Star Wars Holiday Special 2 episode a while back. It is Jesse Bennett from the podcast Question Possible Answer. How's it going?
Hey, Steven. It's going pretty good. Great to be back, and really looking forward to discussing this movie with you.
Yeah, this was an odd choice, because, they were trying to get like a Men in Black 3 off the ground, but before they did that, they did this movie and then the prequel movie, and then they brought like Josh Brolin back for Men in Black 3. So we'll get to that one at some point this year, I'm sure. But yeah, Frank the Pug. Well, I guess first off, we'll talk about our general opinion of the Men in Black franchise. So, like, what's your general opinion based on like what you remember right now? Because I know there's like a memory erasing feature on some of these movies.
No. Yeah. It's kind of makes it hard to give a full answer to the question. Um, but for the most part, I've really enjoyed the franchise. Especially like the earlier movies, whenever there wasn't such a giant lore buildup and you have to try to remember, but you can't remember.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I know there's like also the animated series that came out between the 97 film and its sequel, which like I remember glimpses of whenever my brother watched it, but I was like really young and didn't really pay much attention. And apparently they take place after the second movie. I always thought it was like between, but apparently I'm wrong based on what I read.
The show always confused me because I guess it's a non-canon show, uh, but it always confused me because at the end of the first movie, Kay gets neuralized, and then they start this animated show, and it's Jay and Kay going on adventures together, but Kay shouldn't be there.
Right. Yeah. So I guess that's why people say it could fit after the second movie. But yeah, this is a weird franchise with like all that sort of memory erasing stuff. But I guess that could always be used as a cop out for why they might not fit perfectly. But like, what'd you think of like this idea of like doing this talking dog sort of movie in the 2000s?
So I loved the character Frank in the first movie and in the second movie. but hearing that he was getting his own movie concerned me.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if this little alien would be able to hold his own in this universe, or what, I wasn't sure what type of movie it was going to be. I wasn't sure if it would be capable. So I definitely came into this movie nervous and with low expectations.
Right, because you would have been like a teenager when it was being made and announced, right?
Uh, yeah, I guess, let's see, yeah, it came out in 2004, so I would have been like 13 or 14, somewhere around there.
Movie studios kind of use talking dog movies as a safety net at times. Like it feels like they make them just because there is like an audience who will like rent them, for kids and stuff. But it's not necessarily like a huge audience. Like I don't know if there's like a lot of people who over time have always been clamoring for talking dog movies, but we've gotten a bunch of them regardless. DC's League of Super Pets recently, of course, and like some other ones. But yeah, it kind of felt like they weren't sure what to do, but then looked at Frank the Pug and were like, hey, people love dogs. They love this pug. Let's give him his own movie, and just sort of went from there. Frank, like, it's kind of ambiguous, I guess. Like, it feels kind of 2000s, but there are also sequences where it's supposed to be flashbacks to like the 60s and he's like in a circus. So, because there are all these posters that say the incredible talking pug. So they kind of go back and forth between, I guess, like after he's first arrived on Earth and when he's working in the present as of when this film came out. So it kind of gets confusing at times, I think. But what was your reaction to how this was edited in that way?
Kind of confused me a little bit at first. The adventures of Frank, but we're gonna kind of blend the stories together so you don't know which story is which, but they all still kind of match and adhere to an overarching narrative. It didn't seem like it was edited in the right order, I guess. Like, it was almost like we're gonna shoot this scene and now it goes in the movie here. Instead of, shoot the scene and edit the film accordingly.
Yeah, because the way that they've structured it is kind of bananas, which is fitting, I guess, because the adversary he goes up against is this alien who looks like a monkey whom he meets while he's like at the circus, and like they know what each other are, and they're sort of buddies for a while, but then it turns out that this monkey is, trying to take over the world, trying to make a planet of the monkeys, so to speak. Even though he's an alien that just looks like a monkey.
Yeah, and I did love that character. Like, whenever we first get introduced to him somewhat early in the film, he's Frank's buddy, his first real friend on the planet, it seems like. And I was like, oh, I really love this character, but I know he's going to be gone by the end because of the other movies, basically. So I was really wondering what they're going to do with him. And then whenever we get the twist where he's been calling the shots, from behind the cage, it was really a surprise.
Yeah, and what did you think of the voice actor that they got for this monkey guy?
Um, I, s- I still can't put his voice, like, it definitely sounds familiar, but I can't place it still. Which is, I guess, a sign of a good voice actor if you can't tell it's them.
Yeah, it was, and I was surprised when I looked this up, but it was actually Jim Carrey. Like he was able to change his voice just enough so that he doesn't sound too Jim Carrey-ish, and it was like, wow, I can't believe that was him.
Okay, yeah, that it makes sense. Now that I think about it, yeah. I guess another reason why it was so hidden is like the Jim Carrey is very, arms wavy and like an eccentric actor whenever he's doing a live performance. And the monkey was a little bit more reserved in its movements. It wasn't as Jim Carrey in its moving nature.
Yeah, I think they were holding back because the CGI wasn't quite there yet. Like I remember hearing that like they tried doing like a lot more movement for it, but it just looked off whenever they tried that. The CGI does look a bit off-putting, but I feel like it kind of works because of the alien nature of Dr. Monkey, as he refers to himself for some reason. Like, I don't know if they could have like come up with something more creative, but yeah, I guess that explains like why he's not as animated as Jim Carrey usually is.
But the Dr. Monkey thing, like, did he get a PhD, or is this just your standard bad guy named Doctor?
Right. Yeah, because he does mention some sort of university on this planet, but they don't like really go into detail as to like whether he got the like doctorate or whatever, if it's just like a nickname he gave himself. It's kind of confusing.
Yeah, they,
Um,
they don't zoom in and show us what he majored in while he was there, or if
yeah,
he even graduated.
right. I mean, maybe he dropped out and that's why he's a villain. I don't know. Like they don't really explain, so I guess we sort of just have to sort of form our own possible answers, I guess you could say.
It is what we're good at.
Yeah, but going into the CGI, do you, and I guess like animation in general, do you want to talk about the similarities with Chippendale, like the art style and whatnot?
So I found it interesting, and like I know Chippendale is like a much newer movie, so like they were very well at blending all these different styles of animation together into a more fluid looking product. And then back in 2004 when they were making this movie, it was really mainly just during the opening credits where it seemed like they were trying to show that blending nature, where if you pay, because all these movies start in space and they come into Earth in some nature and focus in on our target, and you could see in space, well, that planet was done in the style of their animated show, and this you could just see that you weren't sure if this movie was going to be animated going into it at first, and then we finally land and it's, oh no, it's live action.
Yeah, it's live action for the most part, but there are like moments here and there where they decide to make like an animated moment, I guess, to like like they were trying to appeal to kids with these trailers that showed those animated moments, but when you watch the movie itself, it just comes across as false advertising. Like, wow, these cartoon moments were like really brief. It's really weird.
Yeah, it would be like a short dream sequence or something, and or the effects of somebody else doing something, hit hard on the head for that one scene, and then they get shaken out of it, and then they're back to normal.
I was quite surprised by how focused on, well, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised because it's his movie, but how focused on Frank it is. And like they don't really show much of like the familiar human characters. Like we see him working at the MIB headquarters and talking to some people, but it's like, huh, these are all people that I'm not familiar with. This is kind of weird.
Yeah, it just seemed like it was more or less like, here's a bunch of background characters that are almost peanutsy still, also, not showing like the face. A lot of shots, it seemed, was just like, well, we're focusing on the dog, so you're only seeing up waist high, and then you hear the voices, and you only saw like a few faces actually in MIB, and none of them were the familiar ones.
Yeah, there was even a moment where someone is speaking and they sound like wah, 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 and then the camera pans over and it's not a human but like a tall alien character, which I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah, it was just like slight nod. We know people are going to think about it. Let's just put one in.
Yeah, and Frank is given this file, like this sort of briefing of like what's going on with Dr. Monkey, like in the present time, like in the 2000s, and he's like kind of surprised that Dr. Monkey has resurfaced. And, this is when we get some more of those circus flashbacks where, they're working together, buddy buddy, and but they also have some arguments behind the scenes being like, we could do more, like we could run this joint. And Frank's like, no, I'm not so sure about that type of thing. In the present, he's very anxious to find Dr. Monkey. And so he has to like go around Chicago investigating because, he has all these leads, and it's like he has to go around figuring out like where his location is.
It always kind of made me wonder because in the first movie, I remember they had the tracker where they could tell where certain aliens were. And in this one, it was more Frank being a detective and not asking for this information. It's just like, hey, we know he's gone. And Frank's like, well, I'm going to have an adventure out of this. Like it seemed like I don't know if he knew there were resources that could help him, or maybe Dr. Monkey was just never chipped. But it was great seeing Frank, walking the streets of Chicago and getting to investigate things his way and occasionally getting distracted and having to chase down whatever he's smelling.
Yeah, and of course the soundtrack they're obligated to include the song "Who Let the Dogs Out," right? So we get like
Right.
this montage where he's like walking around Chicago, sort of taking it in and like starting to investigate, but it's set to the song "Who Let the Dogs Out." Funny enough, I think Chicago is also where one of the Space Jam spin-offs took place. I think it might have been Race Jam, which came out like a year after this or something. So yeah, it's just kind of something random I noticed. But yeah, he decides that, as he's investigating, he realizes he has to go to Target and speak to the Target mascot dog, who also turns out to be an alien. Like, I guess, like some sort of they're of the same people or related people or something. What'd you think of that scene?
I thought it was interesting. I ended up really enjoying it because it kind of expand like, oh, if it's an animal that's in commercials or something, there's a good chance it's actually an alien. Um, and so after that, it made sense that, oh, of course the Target mascot is an alien.
Yeah, and the target is like actually part of it's not just something that was like died on or whatever for the commercials. And it was really surprising that through the target, like over the eye, like can actually shoot a laser from that one eye. Like apparently not from the other eye, which is kind of weird, but yeah, I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, getting to see that and be like, why does, oh, okay, yeah, it's just the way that they choose to reveal everything because they don't have the time to do a full character introduction and background. So it's just like you see it as it goes and they leave you to pick up the pieces and figure it out.
Yeah. So the target dog, Bullseye, basically says like, yeah, the humans called me Bullseye and it kind of stuck. I like it. And Bullseye has heard word that Dr. Monkey is trying to break some people out of this prison to become his henchmen. And so they try to go over and stop him. And like this is like a really intense scene with like Bullseye trying to fire laser to like stop Dr. Monkey, but of course, Dr. Monkey has a lot of tools at his disposal. Like, what'd you think of the gadgets that Dr. Monkey had?
At first, I liked it. I was like, okay, he came prepared. And then, because like he had, his basic tools for getting into his rooms and stuff that he was trying to infiltrate. But then he starts pulling out his special gadgets that were, I mean, I can understand him having gadgets for Frank because he knew Frank, but having like a mirror reflector that he was able to use perfectly against Bullseye was kind of off-putting. That was just one gadget that I really wasn't a fan of, but I did like, he had like his little grenades that he tried, or not grenades, but like sleep grenades that he was trying to use, and I thought those were pretty cool.
Yeah, like the sleep grenades were kind of strange in that not only would they emit some sort of smoke, but they would also play a lullaby, and that would sort of like lull someone to sleep. And it was like the lullaby that they ended up using was basically like Jigglypuff from Pokemon singing. It was like,
I thought
wow.
it sounded familiar.
Yeah, it was like, wow, that must have cost a bit to use that. And this is when Frank, of course, gets knocked out and has one of those cartoon dream sequences. What did you think of like the duration of this sequence? Was it too long, too short? Like, what did you think?
I felt like it was pretty much the right amount of time. I did feel it was unneeded. I feel like it wasn't related to the overarching movie plot at all. It just seemed like, hey, here's a short story that we're going to tell inside this movie. But the amount of time that they take for it wasn't bad. It just felt unneeded for the plot.
Yeah, it does feel like padding to me. Like it's basically like you have this little 2D short about Frank on a sailboat and like eating spaghetti. And it's like he makes a joke where he's like, "Ha, I don't have to share this like the two dogs in that one movie." And it's basically like a Lady and the Tramp reference.
Yeah, and you get the feeling that like this is like his ultimate dream, like what he wants to do in life is just relax on that sailboat, and it looks like he's head of MIB, and like, they're trying to be like, hey, we need you for something, and he's like, no, call, and it's the one reference that we get of J&K. He's like, call J&K, they can handle it.
Yeah, like he basically wants to be in charge, but not at the office, which, I mean, that's the dream, right? Like just being in charge of something, making a lot of income, but not like having to do much. I guess it's like kind of selfish, but I know there's like a lot of people who would want that.
I mean, I would love to be on a beach drinking mimosas and getting a paycheck for it.
Yeah.
It's all about how you word it.
Right, yeah. And so he wakes up and apparently like when he was asleep he reverted back to his original like alien form where he's got green fur, three-pointed tail, and some antennae.
Just seeing it for myself in live action was kind of weird. I feel like they did a decent job at it, but seeing Bullseye's reaction was, I mean, Bullseye definitely looked confused, like they never talked about it, just assumed he was a talking pug. And like, hold on, you're green and you have antennae? And Frank just shrugs it off as Frank would, and is like, yeah, it's a thing.
When they met up, Bullseye said was an alien and just assumed that Frank was just a talking pug and not an alien, which was kind of funny because it's like, this alien is assuming that there are like talking animals. It explains that, well, parrots are a thing. So I figured maybe a pug talking wouldn't be so out of the question.
Yeah, and like, seems like some aliens will, in some way, to prove themselves as alien or something, will show bits of themselves, I guess. And it's like, well, you also, Frank never did that, to be like, no, look, and like makes his tail come out real quick, or like none of that ever transpired.
Right. And Bullseye is like also showing original kept under wraps as well, apart from the target. And like all these spikes, they're covered in white fur, but you could tell they're like still like really sharp. But like just the way it looks with the CGI is kind of video gamey and off-putting, so it's like super weird. It looks like a digital porcupine.
Yeah, almost like the early renditions of Sonic, except even lower quality. But like you could see that they were trying, and then like, okay, well, just kind of blend it instead of going a full CGI route. We'll just add, we'll try to add CGI to it, and that may have. I would have liked to have seen what it looked like full CGI instead of the blend that they attempted to do.
I think maybe something that could have helped it is if the spikes were somehow a different color and not just the same fur color. I don't know. It just seemed like they could have done it better, definitely. But yeah, they revert back to their disguised forms, and it's nighttime now. If that's how long they've been out, and the prison guards were like super mad at them for not stopping Dr. Monkey. What'd you think of like how they were being yelled at here in terms of the performance that was delivered?
It felt on par for the rest of the movie. It wasn't, hey, get back here, or anything like that, and it wasn't overly perfect or anything like that. But again, it seemed like it tried to just focus on Bullseye and Frank making a run for it, and instead of having a cute little chase scene, you get guards yelling at them as they just turn a corner.
Yeah, it's kind of like they feel like they have to have all these chase scenes like really close together to keep the audience awake. And so when they leave the prison, they're back on the streets of Chicago and it's nighttime and it looks really nice where they're at. It's, lights look pretty cool. And they got like this noir type of music, which is kind of funny because it's kind of like they're detectives. And there's this cameo that happens as they're walking. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's almost like a blink and you'll miss it moment. But they're kind of walking, and they walk past this little poodle being walked by its owner, and uh, the owner is Martha Stewart, and
Yeah.
you just kind of hear her saying something about, it's time to go to the bathroom, Mr. Frinkelsworth, and the poodle, sorry, turns towards Frank and Bullseye, and it's Snoop Dogg saying, that's not my name." And then it just goes back to the movie. Just a wonderful little cameo that I thought was amazing.
Yeah, that was something that I needed explained to me, definitely, because it's like, wait, what was that all about? But then after hearing that, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Um, and so after that poodle moment, they do, like, Frank and Bullseye do step into a puddle by accident, and it turns out to be like some sort of secret portal into Dr. Monkey's lair, which, like, I thought this was maybe too convenient. Like, how'd you react to this?
It was another kind of off-putting moment because in the scene it doesn't look magical or out of spacey in any way. It just looks like a normal puddle on the street, and then like they step on it and it does like a mirror flip, I guess you could call it, and they're just in this other place, and like you said, felt way too convenient.
Yeah, like they didn't even do much to make it feel very spacey. Like I think if I were doing this, I would have made it so that you could see the starry sky in the puddle, and maybe when they go through it, it's like a long tunnel with like uh, lights of different colors swirling around. But no, they're like pretty minimalist with this. Like they just go through, and then they're in this generic lab looking place with like silver walls and stuff.
I'll give them a little bit of credit, I guess, like, whenever they get to the lab, there is the hallway that they try to make look out of this world, but they had their chance on the transition and it was pretty subpar.
Yeah, I guess the budget wasn't really that high for this movie. Like they only had to focus on, like, I guess most of their resources went into the CGI for Frank and Bullseye and Dr. Monkey. This is a spin-off about basically just a mascot for Men in Black rather than the Men in Black main characters themselves. So, yeah, of course, it would be like subpar in terms of the budget, but even still, I kind of wish they could have done better with that.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting, like best of the best when it came to animation or CGI, but I was expecting just a little bit more.
Yeah. And so they're infiltrating this lab slash base, trying to roll high on those stealth checks if you're using D&D terms, and just snooping around and seeing the prisoners who had escaped basically doing Dr. Monkey's bidding, and they're like wearing these devices on their heads, which pretty much shows that they're being mind controlled and not really doing all this by choice. It's just that Dr. Monkey needed these particular prisoners who were really big and strong, and like he just needed them to help him construct some stuff in this place.
Yeah, I was expecting basically what we got there. It was nice to see that they had, or I guess that Dr. Monkey had some type of respect for them. Like he wasn't being hateful towards them, but he was at the same time taking over them to do his bidding. But he still kind of had a heart.
Right, like he was very complimentary toward them and saying like how useful they are, but he's still like depriving them of their agency, and it's not like he's getting them to do much worse things. Like they don't really kill anyone in this movie, but he's like still mind controlling them to like build this device for him. So it's kind of weird the direction they go with Dr. Monkey. There are like some moments where they try to make the audience see where he's coming from and sort of sympathize with him and being like, oh, I've always wanted a crew and whatnot. But like if you really think about it, it's still pretty whack that he's like doing all this to like these people.
Like they did a good job at making you feel for him in the beginning, but they quickly get away from that, and I feel like they rush his progression without showing you what gets him there.
Yeah, like it does get explained a little bit when Frank confronts him again, and Dr. Monkey is like, You abandoned me, Frank. You thought you were too good for the circus. And then I felt all alone and felt like I had to strike out on my own. And like in the grand scheme of things, like I know there are other aliens in on Earth in this world, but Dr. Monkey, I guess, felt like Frank was a kindred spirit and felt sort of abandoned by him. But we also don't really see a super emotional moment of like Frank leaving him. Like the way that it's remembered is that, Frank just felt like he wanted to do other things. There's no heavy debate or argument that showcases like all the emotions that they could have. It's just very casual.
Yeah, it looked like a normal farewell, just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm on to bigger and better, do well for yourself, Like it looked normal, and then what is it, 10, 20 years later, 40 years later, I guess at this point. It's hard to remember exactly, but somewhere in that time frame, he decides to get all this resentment.
Yeah, it's just sort of festered like the Addams Family character, I guess. Like I guess it's understandable that they wouldn't try to make this too dramatic given the type of movie this is. But I also feel like it would have perhaps made me like it a bit more. It just kind of feels like the first live action Scooby-Doo movie where they play off Scrappy-Doo as a joke in a flashback, and then that just leads to a reveal that's just yet another joke like later on. It's just kind of off-putting in a way. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. Because now that I think about it, it's like, yeah, that was a. I feel like the first movie for Scooby Doo was good until that, because and but I guess the writer for that one, he didn't like Scrappy, so he was like, I'll make him the bad guy.
Yeah, what's funny is like we're recording like around the time of that movie's 20th anniversary. Like I think it's a few days away, but I remember seeing that movie in the theater and being like, "Whoa, why is Scrappy acting like this?" Cuz as a kid, I loved renting the VHS of Scooby-Doo meets the Boo brothers. It's like these three ghosts that are kind of like the Three Stooges, I guess. And Scrappy is like in the movie, like with them, helping them solve the mystery. And I remember as a little kid, I actually liked Scrappy-Doo, and then seeing what became of him in that movie, I thought was really weird. I was really confused. And then years later, I read on the internet that people, like, I guess in general, hate Scrappy-Doo. And I'm like, wait, what? I never realized this. Like, how aware were you of the Scrappy-Doo hate when you were growing up?
Well, whenever I was growing up, we didn't have this internet like we do now, so there weren't all these forums and groups, and so I wasn't aware of it. Like I was, in the middle. I didn't hate them, but I didn't, I wasn't a huge fan of them. I was just like, okay, new character. We'll see how long this lasts. And then years later, seeing all the information, I was like, wow. It's not the first introduction to hatred towards the show, but it was still kind of weird seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, I guess I could understand why people would not like Scrappy Doo. Like, it's basically, Scooby Doo, but smaller and trying to make him cuter. And I guess some people also found him really annoying. Like, I never really found him annoying as a kid up until that live action movie.
Yeah, he
Um,
definitely felt annoying in the movie for sure.
yeah, they like really amped it up there, made him like a spoiled dog, like just really like full of resentment and stuff. But yeah, and in my favorite Scooby-Doo show, Mystery Incorporated, there's actually an episode where Daphne and Freddy go to some, I think it's like a museum, and they see like a statue of Scrappy-Doo, and they're like, we're not going to talk about him. And it's like this really weird thing where it's like, wow, they like put him in there, but also like can't really acknowledge him. Like I'm this is probably gonna be an unpopular opinion, but I kind of want Scrappy Doo to make some sort of triumphant comeback at some point, like in a way that works. Um,
Right, like
like
they've revamped the show enough, like enough different iterations where I feel like they're warranted another attempt at this character and they could approach it in a different way and maybe get some fan approval this time.
yeah, maybe even make him cuter somehow, like they've done with some of these, Baby Groot or like Grogu or something. Like maybe it's just the voice and the eyes that they need to change or something.
All right, they could approach it and introduce her this time around or something. Give a nice female voice coming out of the puppy.
Right. Like I guess if they made like a reboot that was like a separate continuity, like I mean the Scoob movie is a different continuity even, so they could do something like that. Maybe even like give the puppy a different name, like because I guess Scrappy isn't that appealing of a name. So it could be like a different name. I mean, this is like a weird tangent that I just thought of that's probably not even really comparable, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Next Mutation, was like a really short lived show where they decide to add a female turtle, but I guess like the
Remember
way,
that.
yeah, Venus de Milo, and I guess like people weren't really into it. Like I remember watching that show when it was on Netflix like 10 years ago or something, and I was like, I guess this is okay, but I guess people really were not into it, and Yeah, I don't know, but I'm sure that they could like get the idea of like the basic idea of Scrappy and sort of revamp it one way or another, whether that be with that same character or with a remix of the character or a different character. Like there's different routes they could go with it.
Right, they could introduce a cat instead and just something completely new, mix it up, and then they'll realize 6 episodes in that is not what the fans want.
Yeah, just a kitten. Like hopefully not like the Fairly Odd Parents where they introduce a puppy who is somehow annoying. Like uh but anyway, like where were we in this movie? I'm like trying to remember.
Oh yeah, we got off on that tangent. I forgot that's not what we were talking about for a minute.
They confront Dr. Monkey, and the device that he has created is it's very on the nose. He calls it the ruler, and it's basically this giant ruler where if he presses a button, it'll emit a signal that'll make humans walk toward this location. And so he'll be able to put more of these like mind control devices on them. And like this plan seems like a really terrible plan. Like just describing it is just a head scratcher.
and the design, it's it's a giant stick with a button on it.
Yeah, he has
It's,
to like climb all the way to the top of it to press it.
and so it's just one of those moments where it's like, okay, it makes sense because he is a monkey, an alien monkey, so he guess he hasn't paid that much attention in all of his years on Earth to figure out how everything works. And so he's like, well, I'll do my best with what I've got. This plan came together in a hurry, but they make it seem like he's been planning forever.
Yeah, it's like he's been planning forever and this is what he came up with. It's just really unusual. So Frank and Bullseye try to do their best to like, try to defeat him, and they're like, we gotta get these mind control devices off these prisoners, and so they do that. But the prisoners are like really mad. They don't know where they are, and they're like, should we attack these talking dogs or should we attack this talking monkey? And it's like they're really confused about like everything that's going on here.
Yeah, I do like the one moment where they decide to attack the monkey and they go to throw the giant ruler like as a group. And of course, you throw a stick, a dog's gonna chase it.
Yeah. Yeah, even if it's like an alien dog, it's like they feel obligated to chase it.
It lets you know that is something that is in the gene pool.
Yeah,
Like
it's
throw a stick, a dog will chase it. It does not matter what universe it's from.
yeah, it's such a universal thing, I guess. And so Dr. Monkey is overwhelmed by all of them, and they're able to destroy this device and get it to stop working. And so Dr. Monkey is, he's captured and locked up, and it's pretty much like all's well that ends well type of thing. And Frank says to Bullseye, how can I ever repay you? And Bullseye gets Frank to have a cameo in a Target commercial.
They do hold Frank to a certain level, and they maintain that the whole time through. Like they make sure that Frank is portrayed properly.
Because before shooting the commercial, they show Frank the script for it, and he's like, yeah, I would never say that or do this. And so like they have to rewrite it before shooting it, and he's basically just being himself in the commercial alongside Bullseye and saying, yeah, shop at Target and all that jazz.
Yeah, like it was one of those amazing scenes that like just another one of those, didn't know I wanted this until I got it moments.
Yeah, I really wanted to be marketed at by this scene.
Yeah.
Basically, it ends with Frank being like, well, just another day in the life of Frank the Pug.
I do like as it fades to black right before credits, because he's walking back to MIB headquarters. It's like, oh, what a great relaxing, what a day. Off screen, as it fades to black, you do hear Zed, Frank, where have you been? I need you. And he just like, oh yeah, forgot to tell the boss I was leaving.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have a Snoop Dogg song during the credits. I'm not very familiar with his discography, so I'm not really sure which song this was, but it was probably something recent at that time, I would imagine.
I'm not like, I know I've heard a few songs. I don't keep up with the names of the songs. I'm not that fluent in my Snoop Dogg.
Right, like we're not caught up in our Snoop Dogg lore.
Yes.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I guess we could go into final thoughts and score out of 10. So what are your final thoughts, score out of 10, and unit of measurement for that score for Frank the Pug?
Wasn't really what I was expecting going into it. I wasn't sure what to expect, but it wasn't that. Um, it had the chances to tell a great story. Like I liked the introduction of the characters. I just didn't like how the scenes were handled for the most part. Would love to see it again if they chose to remake it in some sense, or if they took away my memory of this and gave me the chance to watch it again. I would probably still watch it again.
Yeah, because they use the
But
memory erasing thing before the credits as well.
yeah,
So we blinked this time, so we'd remember.
yeah, so if I would probably watch it again just for that effect. But I would probably give it 6.5 spaghetti meatballs.
Okay. There are parts of it that were kind of fun, but overall it felt kind of generic and also like an odd detour for the franchise at this point in time. Like the 2000s, like there were like some weird spin-offs and stuff going on, and also like some weird like talking animal like live action movies. So not the best time for this sort of thing, I guess. Overall, I mean, I guess I've seen worse movies, but overall my gut feeling is that I'm not sure if I'd want to watch this again, but yeah, like my gut feeling is I'd give this 5 out of 10 Target shopping carts. Not one of my favorites, but yeah, I guess that's what I'm feeling. But I guess that'll do it. So thanks again for being on the show, Jesse. Where can people find question, possible answer?
Oh, thanks again for having me. It was a great time as always. People can find Question Possible Answer just by searching on Facebook and Instagram for Question Possible Answer. It will pop up. You can also find us over on Anchor, anchor.fm/question dash possible dash answer, or on iTunes, Google Podcast, Spotify, all wherever you get your podcast at. You can find us there for movie discussions that kind of dive into the sciences behind the movies.
Yeah, go ahead and check out question, possible answer. And yeah, I'll link that in the show notes as usual. As for me, people can email this podcast, delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your favorite dog movies, I guess. You can follow me at Steven Shinder on Instagram and Twitter, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook. Check out my novel Lemons Will Make Rain. It's on Amazon. You can also go to stevenshinder.com for info. And next book, Trespassing Through the Visages, will come out later this year. I have been making more progress with it, so just keep an eye out or keep your ears out or whatever. And I'm also on a podcast with my dad called Yes Shift. We talk about the band Yes. We've even interviewed a few people from Yes, as well as like some other people. Like we've recently interviewed Clive Bailey and Max Hunt from Mabel Greer's Toy Shop and Affirm. So yeah, people who are Yes fans will know the connection, I guess. So go check that podcast out, which I'll link as usual. And next episode, I have a few ideas of what it could be, but I haven't like decided which one should be the next one. But rest assured, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode. But without further delay, have a good day.